In a corner of town, an aging seamstress worked late beneath flickering lights in her quiet workshop. Suddenly, a hungry young man with shaking hands knocked on her door, asking for a chance at a job. Though the town called him trouble, she saw something no one else did: potential. She gave him food, a place to sleep, and the courage to believe in himself. Months later, just as whispers and doubt threatened to tear them apart, a luxury car pulled up with an offer that could change his future forever. And the choice he made next would lead to something neither of them ever imagined. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because this story is only getting started. The afternoon sun hung low over the industrial district, casting long shadows between the weathered buildings. Marcus Williams walked slowly down Parker Street, his thin frame barely filling out the faded denim jacket that had seen better days. His sneakers, worn through at the toes, scuffed against the cracked pavement as he approached another potential workplace. The hand-painted sign read Matthews Alterations. Marcus took a deep breath, pushed his shoulders back, and knocked on the glass door. A middle-aged woman looked up from behind the counter, her expression shifting from neutral to cold in an instant. "We're not hiring," Mrs. Matthews said flatly, not even setting down the fabric in her hand. "Ma'am, I'm a hard worker. I said we're not hiring." Mrs. Matthews's voice was harder now. "And even if we were, it wouldn't be you. Word gets around, boy. Don't want that kind of trouble here." The door closed before Marcus could respond. He stood there for a moment, feeling the familiar sting of rejection settle into his chest. That made 7 places today. 7 doors closed in his face. Down the street he tried the hardware store. The owner took one look at him and shook his head. "Sorry, son, can't help you." At the lumber yard, the foreman didn't even let him finish his sentence. "Get out of here before I call the cops." By the time Marcus reached Thompson's General Store, his last hope on this block, his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from hunger. He hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. Mrs. Thompson, an older woman with kind eyes, at least had the decency to look apologetic. "I'm sorry, honey. I would help if I could. But my customers, they talk. They say you bring bad luck, that everywhere you go something breaks. After what happened with the councilman's daughter." She shook her head. "I have a business to protect. I have grandchildren to feed." "I didn't do anything wrong," Marcus said quietly. "I was trying to help that woman. The guy was robbing her." "I believe you," Mrs. Thompson said, and she seemed genuine. "But it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what they believe, and right now this whole town believes you're trouble." She pressed a small bag into his hands. "A sandwich and an apple. I can't give you work, but I can give you this. Now go before someone sees." Marcus took the bag with trembling hands. "Thank you." As he walked away, he heard voices behind him. 2 men stood outside the barber shop, watching him. "That's the kid," one of them said, not bothering to lower his voice. "The one who put Tommy Douglas in the hospital. Heard he's on something, pills or worse. Someone should run him out of town before he hurts someone else." Marcus kept walking, his jaw clenched, fighting the urge to turn around and defend himself. What was the point? Nobody would listen, nobody ever did. The evening air grew cooler as the sun continued its descent. Neon signs flickered to life. The bar, the pawn shop, the check-cashing place. Places that thrived in the shadows of this forgotten corner of town. Trash skittered across the street, pushed by the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter and kept moving, searching for somewhere, anywhere that might offer him a chance. Night fell quickly, bringing with it a cold drizzle that soaked through Marcus's thin jacket. He found shelter under an old railroad bridge at the edge of town, where the highway overpass created a small dry space among the concrete pillars. He sat with his back against the cold stone, pulled his backpack close, and carefully removed the only thing that mattered, a photograph in a plastic sleeve. Even in the dim light, he could make out his mother's face. She was smiling in the picture, standing in front of their old apartment, her cleaning uniform crisp and clean. That had been a good day, one of the few. "I'm trying, Mama," he whispered to the photograph. "I'm really trying," his stomach growled. He'd eaten the sandwich Mrs. Thompson gave him hours ago, saving the apple for tomorrow. Would tomorrow be any different? Would anyone give him a chance? The rain picked up, drumming against the concrete above. Water began to seep through cracks, dripping onto his shoulders. Marcus closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. His body was too cold, too hungry, too worn down by rejection. Through the rain he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A light in the distance, about 2 blocks away. It glowed yellow and warm against the darkness, steady and unwavering. Unlike the flickering neon signs he'd passed earlier, this light felt different, almost inviting. Marcus squinted through the rain. It appeared to be coming from some kind of workshop. Even from here, he could hear the faint sound of a sewing machine, the rhythmic hum of needle through fabric. Someone was working late, someone who might need help, someone who might not have heard the rumors yet. It was probably foolish to hope. Hope had failed him so many times, but what else did he have? Marcus carefully tucked his mother's photograph back into his backpack, protecting it from the rain. He stood up, his joints stiff and aching, and started walking toward the light. With each step, the sound grew clearer. Not just one sewing machine, but something else, an old industrial machine, struggling, fighting to stay alive. The sound reminded him of his own heartbeat lately. Tired, barely holding on, but still running. Just barely. Eleanor Morrison stood at her cutting table, her weathered hands guiding fabric beneath the blade with practiced precision. The fluorescent light above buzzed and flickered, casting unstable shadows across the cluttered workshop. She adjusted the pattern one more time and stepped back. "Come on now," she muttered, reaching for the industrial sewing machine. The machine whirred to life, coughed twice, then the thread jammed. Eleanor sighed deeply, the sound of a woman who'd become accustomed to disappointment. She removed the bobbin, untangled the thread, for what felt like the 100th time that week, and glanced at the old radio on her workbench. The late-night DJ was playing Ella Fitzgerald, the jazz vocals filling the empty spaces of the workshop. This machine had been her mother's. After her daughter Grace died 5 years ago, Eleanor had barely touched it. The machine sat mostly idle now, gathering dust, a reminder of all the beautiful things she used to create when she still had hope. When she still had someone to sew for. Customers had grown scarce. The bigger shops on the other side of town had newer equipment, younger seamstresses, better reputations. Eleanor was just the older black woman, with the small alteration shop on the wrong side of the tracks. The woman who'd once been turned away from every decent job in town because of the color of her skin. The woman who'd built this place with her own hands, only to watch it slowly die. She looked around the workshop, walls lined with fabric bolts that had become extensions of her own creative vision. The smell of cotton and thread that had soaked into everything including her skin. This place was all she had left. After her husband left, after her daughter Grace, Eleanor closed her eyes, pushing away the memory. Some hearts couldn't be mended. Some things once broken, stayed broken. The radio DJ announced the time, 11:47 p.m. Another day gone, Eleanor said to the empty workshop. She should close up, go back to the small apartment above the shop where her sister Ruth kept telling her she was wasting away. But the thought of lying awake in that empty room, staring at the ceiling, listening to her own thoughts, that was worse than staying here with the fabric, and the thread, and the ghost of what this place used to be. At least here, surrounded by unfinished projects, she felt less alone in her incompleteness. Eleanor picked up her scissors and turned back to the dress on the form. "Let's try one more time, old friend." The knock was so soft, Eleanor almost didn't hear it over the radio. She looked up, confused. Nobody came by this late. Through the grimy window of the shop door, she could make out a figure, young, thin, soaked from the rain. Eleanor's first instinct was to ignore it. Nothing good came from late-night visitors in this neighborhood. But something made her walk to the door and crack it open. The boy standing there looked about 18, maybe younger, white, with dark hair plastered to his forehead, wearing a jacket that was more holes than fabric. His eyes were wide, desperate, but not in a dangerous way, more like a wounded animal, hoping not to be kicked again. "We're closed," Eleanor said. "I know, ma'am. I'm sorry to bother you." The boy's voice shook from cold or fear or both. I'm looking for work, any kind of work. I can clean, I can organize, I can no, please ma'am. I'm a fast learner. I won't cause any trouble. I just need. I said no. Eleanor started to close the door. I'll work for free. The desperation in the boy's voice made Eleanor pause. Just for a few days, for food. I won't ask for money. I need somewhere to. The boy's voice broke. He looked down, clearly fighting tears. Eleanor should close the door. She should tell this boy to go to the shelter on 5th Street. She should protect herself from whatever trouble this stranger might bring. The last thing she needed was more problems, but there was something in the way he stood there, shoulders hunched, trying to make himself smaller, less threatening, something familiar. What's your name? Eleanor found herself asking. Marcus, ma'am. Marcus Williams. Recognition flickered in Eleanor's mind. You're the one they've been talking about. The one who I didn't do anything wrong. Marcus said quickly. I know what people say, but I was trying to help. This woman was getting robbed, and everything went wrong. It always goes wrong, but I didn't mean. He stopped, realizing he was rambling. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. The boy was shaking now, and not just from the cold. Come inside, Eleanor heard herself say. Out of the rain. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? Before I change my mind, Marcus practically stumbled into the workshop, water dripping from his clothes onto the concrete floor. He looked around with a mixture of awe and relief, like he'd just entered a sanctuary. There's towels over there. Eleanor pointed. Dry yourself off, then start with that corner. Needs sweeping. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I'll do a good job, I promise. But as Marcus hurried toward the corner, his hands shaking from cold and hunger and nervous energy, he knocked over a container of pins. They scattered across the floor in a metallic cascade, rolling toward the fabric cutting table. Damn it, Eleanor snapped. Marcus froze, staring at the spreading pins with horror. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'll clean it up. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the dustpan. Eleanor thrust at him. As he bent down to start cleaning, his movements were clumsy and panicked. He only seemed to scatter the pins further. Stop, just stop. Eleanor's voice was sharp with frustration. Marcus stopped, still crouched on the floor, and Eleanor saw the boy's shoulders start to shake, not from cold this time, from trying not to cry. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. I'm sorry, I always mess things up. I'll leave. I'm sorry. Eleanor stood there, looking down at this boy kneeling among scattered pins, shaking and apologizing for existing, and something cracked inside her chest. She saw herself at 23, standing outside the Peterson department store, being told they didn't hire her kind. She saw herself at 25, turned away from job after job, watching her mother get sicker, unable to afford her medicine. She remembered what hunger felt like, what desperation felt like, what it felt like when the whole world treated you like you were nothing. Stay here, Eleanor said quietly. Don't touch anything. She walked out of the workshop, letting the door close behind her. Marcus remained on the floor, convinced he'd just ruined his last chance, ready to gather his backpack and disappear into the night. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The rain drummed steadily on the workshop roof. Marcus slowly stood up, preparing to leave. The door opened. Eleanor walked back in carrying a paper bag. She didn't say anything, just set it on the workbench, and gestured toward it. Marcus approached cautiously. Inside the bag was a burger, cold from the 24-hour gas station down the road, but it might as well have been a 5-star meal. Next to it, a bottle of water. Eat, Eleanor said simply. Marcus's hands trembled as he picked up the burger. He tried to eat slowly, to have some dignity, but his body had other ideas. He wolfed down half of it before he even realized what he was doing. Then he stopped, embarrassed. It's okay, Eleanor said, her voice softer now. Finish it. Tears started rolling down Marcus's cheeks as he ate. He couldn't stop them. The food, the warmth of the workshop, the simple fact that someone, anyone, had shown him kindness. It all came crashing down on him at once. Thank you, he managed between bites. Thank you so much. Eleanor said nothing. She just pulled up an old stool and sat down, her body language no longer defensive. She let the silence stretch out, broken only by the sound of rain, the distant jazz on the radio, and Marcus's quiet eating. When Marcus finished, He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, smearing grease and tears across his face. "When's the last time you slept?" Eleanor asked. "I'm not sure, 2 days maybe." Eleanor nodded slowly, as if confirming something she already knew. She stood up, walked to a storage room in the back, and returned with an old blanket and a rolled-up sleeping bag. "Floor's hard, but it's dry. You can stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, just sleep. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." As Eleanor turned off the main lights, leaving only a small lamp glowing in the corner, Marcus spread out the sleeping bag on the cleanest patch of floor he could find. He lay down, his body finally beginning to relax. For the first time in weeks, he felt safe. Morning light filtered through the grimy windows, turning the dust motes into floating specks of gold. Marcus woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of fabric being organized. Eleanor was already at work, arranging spools of thread by color on the pegboard wall. She glanced over when Marcus stirred. "There's coffee on the workbench. Black. Hope that's okay." "That's perfect. Thank you." Marcus stood up, folded the sleeping bag carefully, and reached for the chipped mug Eleanor had set out. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it was warm, and that was enough. "You said you wanted to work," Eleanor said, not looking at him. "That's still true?" "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." "Then start with that corner. Fabric needs organizing. Everything has a place. You put it back where it belongs. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." For the next hour, Marcus worked in silence, sorting through boxes of buttons, organizing ribbon spools, sweeping thread clippings that had probably been there for years. Eleanor watched him out of the corner of her eye, noting the careful way the boy handled each item, how he paused to figure out where things belonged before putting them away. "Come here," Eleanor finally said, gesturing toward a dress form draped with unfinished fabric. "You know anything about sewing?" "Not really, ma'am, but I want to learn." Eleanor handed him a pin cushion. "First thing you need to know, fabric isn't just thread and cloth, it's got memory. You pull it one way, it remembers. You cut it wrong, it shows. You have to respect what it's trying to tell you, where it wants to fall, what it needs." She picked up a piece of silk, let it drape over her hand. "See this, feel how it moves. That's the grain telling you its story. You work against it, you'll never get it right. You work with it, you can create something beautiful." Marcus leaned closer, watching how the fabric caught the light, how it responded to Eleanor's touch. "It's like it's alive," he said quietly, "like it has feelings." Eleanor looked at the boy with surprise. Most people saw cloth. This boy saw emotion. "Yeah," Eleanor said softly, "that's exactly what it's like." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor felt something other than emptiness, something small, fragile, but undeniably real. Hope. That afternoon, Eleanor walked to Martha's corner store, the small shop 2 blocks from the workshop. Martha Reynolds had run the place for 30 years, and she knew everyone's business. Well, she said when Eleanor walked in. Eleanor Morrison in the daylight, and before closing time no less. "What miracle is this?" "Just need some sandwiches, Martha." "2. Martha raised an eyebrow. "2. You got company, got someone helping out at the workshop." "Helping out?" Martha leaned on the counter, her eyes sharp with curiosity and concern. "Eleanor, you know I heard about that Williams boy. People say a lot of things." Eleanor interrupted. "Most of it's none of their business." Martha studied her face for a long moment, then her expression softened. "You're different today. Your eyes, they're clearer. When's the last time you smiled, Eleanor?" "What are you talking about?" "I smile." "No, you don't. Haven't seen you really smile in 5 years." "Not since." She trailed off, not wanting to mention Grace. Eleanor touched her face, almost surprised. "Sandwiches, Martha, that's all I came for." But as she walked back to the workshop, the paper bag warm in her hands, she realized Martha was right. Something inside her had shifted. The weight she'd been carrying felt just a little bit lighter. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Marcus arrived before sunrise, swept the workshop, organized supplies, and watched Eleanor work. Gradually, Eleanor let him do more, threading needles, pinning patterns, learning how to identify different fabrics by touch. One morning, they stood together over a wedding dress commission, Eleanor's biggest order in months, from a loyal client who'd stuck with her despite the neighborhood's decline and the rumors about Marcus. "This dress means everything," Eleanor said, her hands resting on the delicate lace. "Client's getting married in 6 weeks. Her grandmother wore a dress I made 40 years ago. She's one of the few who still remembers when this place meant quality. Said she wouldn't trust anyone else." Marcus listened, not interrupting. "My daughter Grace, she was supposed to wear a dress I made." Eleanor picked up her scissors, turned them over in her hands. "I had it all planned. The design, the fabric, everything. But she died when she was 19. Car accident coming home from college." "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "My husband, he left after, said I buried myself in this workshop, that I cared more about other people's celebrations than my own family." Maybe he was right. Marcus looked down at his hands, now permanently stained with fabric dye. "My dad left too. Different reason, same result. He drank until there was nothing left of him. One day he just didn't come home. Mom tried to hold things together, but it was too much. She worked herself to death. Literally. Heart attack at 46, behind the register at a convenience store." "How old were you?" 16. "After that I just drifted. Tried to find work, but nobody trusts a kid with no family, no references, no address." His voice cracked slightly. "I just wanted someone to give me a chance, just one chance to prove I wasn't worthless." Eleanor looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw past the dirty clothes and the too thin frame. She saw herself, the younger version before the years had worn her down. "You're not worthless," Eleanor said firmly, "and you're not drifting anymore. You're here, you're learning. That counts for something." Marcus's eyes shone with unshed tears. "Why are you helping me? Everyone else in this town wants me gone." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Because somebody should have helped me when I needed it. Nobody did. I'm not going to be that person who turns away when someone's drowning." They stood in silence, the morning sun streaming through the workshop door, dust dancing in the light. Two broken people finding something like family in the space between needles and thread. "Now come on," Eleanor said, clearing her throat. "This dress isn't going to sew itself. Time I taught you how to do this right." By afternoon, they'd made progress. Marcus's hands, now confident with pins and scissors, moved with purpose as he carefully basted the bodice panels. Eleanor handed him. The radio played softly in the background, Billie Holiday singing about better days. "My daughter would have been about your age now," Eleanor said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Marcus looked up, sensing this was important. "Grace, she was 19 when..." Eleanor's voice caught. She cleared her throat, started again. "I was working late, always working late, trying to keep this place afloat. She called, said she was driving home from school for the weekend. I told her to be careful. That was the last time I spoke to her." Eleanor's hands stilled on the fabric. She lost control on the highway, wet roads. "By the time I got to the hospital, she couldn't finish." "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "My husband blamed me, said if I'd been home more, maybe Grace would have stayed at school that weekend. Maybe she wouldn't have been on that road." Eleanor's eyes were distant, trapped in the past. "He left a month later, couldn't stand to look at me, couldn't stand to be in this workshop where I'd chosen to spend my time instead of with our family." "It wasn't your fault," Marcus said quietly. "Wasn't it?" Eleanor's voice was hollow. "Every choice we make, it ripples out, touches other people's lives. I chose this workshop over my family, and my daughter paid the price." Marcus set down his pins, and sat on the stool across from Eleanor. "My mom used to say that guilt is like a knot in fabric. It pulls everything tight until nothing fits right anymore. She said the only way to fix it is to carefully work it loose, to forgive yourself, to do better next time." And did she forgive herself? For what? For not being able to give you more. For working herself to death. Marcus's breath caught. He'd never thought about it that way. "I don't know. I hope so." "What would you say to her if you could?" "I'd tell her, Marcus's voice broke. I'd tell her that she was enough, that she didn't have to prove anything, that I knew she loved me, even when we had nothing, especially when we had nothing. Eleanor nodded slowly. Maybe that's what Grace would say to me if she could. The two sat in silence, both carrying their ghosts, both trying to figure out how to set them down. Finally Eleanor, what kind of things? That sewing is women's work, that I should be doing something else. Something more, he gestured vaguely. More manly, I guess. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was firm. You know what I think is strange, Marcus? That people think creating beauty is less valuable than destroying things. That working with your hands to make something that brings joy is somehow less important than working with your hands to break things down. She walked over to the dress form, gestured to the wedding dress taking shape. This dress will be worn on one of the most important days of someone's life. It will be in photographs that last generations. It will make someone feel beautiful and confident and loved. Tell me what's not manly about that. But everyone said I couldn't run a business because of the color of my skin. Eleanor interrupted. Everyone said women belong in the kitchen, not in workshops. Everyone said a lot of things that were nothing but fear and ignorance dressed up as wisdom. She turned back to Marcus. My mother's father was a tailor, made suits for the finest men in this city back when they still let black folks do that kind of work. He taught my mother everything he knew, and she taught me. And you know what he used to say? Any fool can swing a hammer. Takes a real man to thread a needle and create something that matters. Marcus's eyes were wet. The guys at the auto shop are scared, Eleanor finished. Scared that if boys like you can do this work and do it well, then maybe all their ideas about what makes a man are wrong. Maybe strength isn't just about muscles and loud voices. Maybe it's about patience and precision, and the courage to do what you love even when people mock you for it. She put a hand on his shoulder. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone brave enough to learn something new, strong enough to keep going when everyone says you shouldn't, smart enough to see beauty in fabric and thread when most people just see cloth. That takes more courage than anything those men outside the auto shop will ever do. Marcus wiped his eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me, just keep working, keep learning. And when you're so good they can't ignore you, when you're creating things that take their breath away, then you can decide if you want to forgive them for being fools. But the poison was spreading faster than Eleanor realized. By the following week, 3 regular customers had stopped coming. The phone, which used to ring a few times a day, went silent. When Eleanor went to Martha's store, conversation stopped when she entered. She knew what that meant. She'd experienced it before, years ago, for different reasons. She knew the weight of community judgment, how it could crush a business, a reputation, a life. But this time she wasn't the target. This time it was the boy who'd started to smile again. The boy who hummed along to the radio while he worked. The boy who was learning to believe in himself despite what the world told him a young man should be. And Eleanor wasn't sure she could protect him from what was coming. Ruth Morrison arrived at the workshop just after sunset, her sensible shoes clicking sharply against the concrete floor. She was a woman who believed in tough love, practical decisions, and protecting her younger sister from her own soft heart. We need to talk, she said, not bothering with greetings. Eleanor looked up from the hem she was stitching. Marcus, sensing tension, quietly moved to the far corner of the workshop, pretending to organize ribbon. About what, Ruth? Don't play dumb with me. About him. She jerked her head toward Marcus. About what you're doing to yourself. I'm running my workshop, same as always. No, you're running it into the ground. Ruth's voice was sharp. Do you know how many customers you've lost this month? Do you know what people are saying? I know what people say. People always have something to say. They're saying you're harboring a criminal. That you're so desperate for company, you'll take anyone in, no matter how dangerous. They're saying, Ruth lowered her voice, but it still carried in the quiet workshop. They're saying you've lost your mind since Grace died, and now you're teaching a boy to sew. Eleanor, people are laughing at you, at him. At this whole situation. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Don't bring Grace into this. Why not? That's what this is about, isn't it? You see some lost boy and you think you can save him. Make up for not being there for your own daughter. That's not, isn't it? Ruth stepped closer. Eleanor, I love you, you're my baby sister, and I've watched you hurt for 5 years. But this isn't healing. This is self-destruction. That boy is going to take everything from you. your business, your reputation, maybe even, he's not taking anything. Eleanor said firmly. He's working, he's learning. He's not what they say he is. How do you know? How do you really know? Because he seems nice. Because he said he's innocent. Ruth's voice cracked with frustration. And teaching him to sew. Eleanor, he's a boy. He should be learning carpentry, mechanics, something that'll actually help him. Not needlework. You're making him a target. Making yourself a laughingstock. The work matters, Ruth. Not who does it. Maybe in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world. We live here, where people judge, where they talk, where they stop doing business with you, because you're doing something they don't understand. Ruth pulled a piece of paper from her purse. The electric bill is overdue. You're eating 1 meal a day. I see the receipts, Eleanor. I know you've been buying him food, buying him supplies. You can't afford this. In the corner, Marcus's hand stilled on the spool he was holding. He could hear every word. I know you're trying to be kind, Ruth continued. But kindness without wisdom is just foolishness. You can't save everyone. You couldn't save Grace, you couldn't save your marriage, and you won't save this boy. You'll just destroy yourself in the process. And for what? To teach him a skill that'll make him the joke of this town, that no one will hire him for because he's male. After Ruth left, the workshop felt oppressively quiet. Eleanor stood motionless, staring at the floor where her sister had stood, her words still echoing. Marcus remained in the corner, head down, hands trembling. You heard all that, Eleanor said, not a question. Yes, ma'am. She's wrong about you. Is she? Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Everyone I try to help ends up worse off. Maybe I am bad luck. And maybe she's right about the sewing. Maybe I should be learning something else, something more appropriate. Don't. Eleanor's voice was firm. Don't run, and don't let them tell you who you should be. But your business, my business was failing before you got here. Been failing for years. That's not on you. Eleanor walked over to the wedding dress, still on the form, nearly complete. She ran her hand along the delicate beadwork. You know what I see when I look at this dress? I see something worth finishing. Something that's been carefully crafted, piece by piece, with patience and care. She turned to look at Marcus. Same thing I see when I look at you. And I don't care if you're a boy doing women's work. Some of the greatest designers in the world are men. Some of the finest tailors who ever lived were men. This isn't women's work or men's work. It's work that matters. Work that creates beauty. Work that takes skill and heart and vision. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. Then don't be. Stay. Work. Learn. Prove them all wrong. Show them that a man can create beauty just as well as any woman. Better, even. Show them that their tiny little boxes of what men should do and women should do are nothing but cages they built for themselves. Eleanor picked up a needle, held it out to Marcus. You with me? Marcus looked at the needle. A simple tool, but in that moment it represented everything. Trust, partnership, family, the courage to be different. He took it. I'm with you. They worked side by side until midnight, not talking much, just the sound of sewing machines and the old radio playing jazz. The wedding dress began to near completion, each stitch bringing it closer to perfection. Outside, the town slept, unaware that inside this small workshop, two people were building something stronger than reputation, more valuable than conformity. They were building hope, and hope, once it starts growing, is hard to stop. 3 days later, everything fell apart. Marcus woke before dawn as usual, but this morning was different. He couldn't sleep. Ruth's words kept playing in his head like a broken record. You'll just destroy yourself in the process. He thought about Eleanor, the way the woman had started to smile more, to hum along with the radio, to seem lighter. But he also thought about the empty workshop, the silent phone, the worried looks Eleanor tried to hide when she paid bills. And he thought about what Ruth had said about him learning to sew, about being a joke, about no one hiring him because men didn't do this kind of work. What if she was right? What if he was wasting his time learning a skill that would only make him more of an outcast? What if he was destroying Eleanor's business and his own future? Marcus sat up on his sleeping bag and looked around the workshop. This place had become home. The smell of fabric and thread, the cluttered workbench, the wedding dress that was almost complete. All of it felt safe, felt right, but safety at Eleanor's expense, and maybe at his own. He pulled out his backpack, removed his mother's photograph, In the dim pre-dawn light, he studied her face. "What should I do, Mama?" he whispered. But he already knew the answer. His mother had sacrificed everything for him, working herself to death so he could eat. She would never want him to let someone else suffer for his sake. With shaking hands, Marcus found a piece of paper and a pencil. He stared at the blank page for a long time before he could bring himself to write. "Miss Eleanor, thank you for everything. You gave me food when I was hungry, shelter when I had nowhere to go, and something more important than both. You made me feel like I mattered. You made me feel human again. But I can't stay, not if it means destroying what you've built. Your sister is right. I'm costing you customers, money, peace. You deserve better than that." And maybe she's right about the other thing too. Maybe a boy learning to sew is just making everything harder, for you and for me. Maybe I should find something else, something that makes more sense. I'll never forget what you taught me. Not just about sewing, but about kindness. About seeing people for who they are, not what others say they are. About having the courage to be different. You're the best person I've ever known. That's why I have to go. Thank you for believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. Marcus, he folded the note, placed it on the workbench where Eleanor would find it, and carefully rolled up his sleeping bag. He took one last look around the workshop, at the fabrics he'd learned to identify by touch, at the wedding dress that was almost finished, at the space where he'd felt for a brief moment like he belonged somewhere. Then he walked out into the cold morning darkness, leaving the only home he'd known in years behind. Eleanor woke at 7, later than usual. Something felt wrong. The quality of silence was different. She came downstairs to find the note on her workbench, Marcus's sleeping bag neatly folded beside it. Her heart sank as she read the words. "Damn it, child," she muttered. She grabbed her jacket and keys and headed for her car. The sky was already darkening with the promise of rain. Where would Marcus go? He had no money, no connections, nowhere safe. Eleanor drove through the neighborhood, scanning the streets, past Martha's store, past the abandoned factory, past the railroad bridge where she suspected Marcus might have slept before. Nothing. The rain started, light at first, then heavy, pounding against her windshield like accusations. Eleanor's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. She thought about turning around, going home. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe Marcus was right to leave. Maybe she had been foolish to try to teach a boy a skill that would only bring him mockery. But she kept driving. She found herself at the edge of town, near the old abandoned textile mill that had closed down 5 years ago. The place was a hollowed-out shell, windows broken, but the loading dock still provided some shelter from the rain. There, huddled against the wall, soaking wet and shivering, was Marcus. Eleanor parked the car and got out, rain immediately soaking through her clothes. Marcus looked up, eyes wide with surprise and shame. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I had to." "Hush now," Eleanor said, not unkindly. She shrugged off her jacket and draped it over Marcus's shoulders. "You're freezing." "I'm sorry," Marcus repeated. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I left." "You thought wrong." Eleanor sat down beside him on the wet concrete, not caring about the rain, the cold, the indignity of it all. "You think running away solves anything. You think that makes my life better." Your sister said. "My sister says a lot of things. She's not always right." Eleanor looked at the boy, really looked at him, soaking wet, shaking from cold and emotion, trying to be brave. "You know what you remind me of?" Marcus shook his head. "That wedding dress in my workshop. When I first started it, the fabric was stiff, uncooperative, fighting every stitch. The client had bought it from another shop, where someone had started it wrong. Everyone said it wasn't worth fixing, told me to start over with new fabric. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." "You know why?" Marcus waited. "Because I could see what it could be. Under all that resistance and damage, there was still fabric worth saving, still something that could be beautiful if someone was willing to do the work." She put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You're not broken, child. You're just unfinished. Just need someone to help you become what you're meant to be." "But what if I can't? What if I really am bad luck? What if your sister is right, and I'm wasting my time learning something that'll only make me a joke?" "What if you're not?" Eleanor interrupted. "What if every person who gave up on you was wrong? What if every person who says men can't do this work is wrong? What if you're exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn?" The rain poured down around them. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "My mother's father was a tailor," Eleanor continued. One of the best in this city. He didn't think twice about whether it was men's work or women's work. He just knew it was work that mattered, work that took skill and heart, and he was proud of what he created. She looked at Marcus intently. The world is changing, Marcus. Slowly, but it's changing. There will always be people who think in boxes, who think men should only do certain things, and women should only do certain things. But those people are dying out, and people like you, who have the courage to do what they love regardless of what others think, you're the future. What if no one hires me? Then you'll create your own path. You'll be so good they can't ignore you. You'll make things so beautiful that people won't care whether you're a man or a woman, they'll just care that you can create what they need. The rain continued to fall, but Marcus was listening now, really listening. Come home, Eleanor said. Please come home. Don't let fear win. Don't let their small minds make your world small. Marcus nodded, tears mixing with rain on his face. Okay, they drove back through the storm in silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence of understanding, of commitment, of two people who decided not to give up on each other or themselves. The next morning, they worked together on the wedding dress with renewed purpose. Everything Eleanor had taught Marcus over the past weeks came together. The careful measuring, the patient stitching, the understanding of how fabric wants to fall. Try it on the form now, Eleanor said, stepping back. Marcus carefully placed the dress on the mannequin, adjusting the shoulders, smoothing the skirt. The dress settled into place, and suddenly it was no longer just fabric, it was art. Marcus's face lit up with joy. We did it. You did most of it, Eleanor said. And there was pride in her voice. Real pride. They stood together, looking at the finished dress. No longer broken, no longer fighting itself, just beautiful, the way it was meant to be. Sunlight streamed through the workshop door, cutting through the fabric-scented air, illuminating the dust motes like stars. The radio played softly, Etta James singing At Last. This moment, Marcus said quietly, this is what you meant about seeing what something can become. Yeah, Eleanor said, that's what I meant. They didn't say anything else, didn't need to. The dress said everything, that broken things could be mended, that patience and care could transform struggle into beauty, that two people working together could create something wonderful, that courage meant doing what you loved, regardless of what the world said you should be. Martha walked past the workshop on her way to open her store. She stopped, surprised to hear laughter coming from inside. Real laughter, Eleanor's laugh, warm and genuine, mixed with Marcus's younger voice. She smiled to herself. Maybe Eleanor's sister was wrong. Maybe kindness wasn't foolishness after all. Maybe sometimes the bravest thing you could do was believe in someone when the whole world said you shouldn't. And maybe the bravest thing a young man could do was pursue beauty instead of conforming to someone else's idea of masculinity. Inside the workshop, the sewing machines hummed softly, and two people who'd been running on empty finally felt full. 3 months later, life had found a rhythm. The workshop wasn't thriving, but it was surviving. A few brave customers had returned, curious about the boy everyone talked about, and had been impressed by his growing skill. Some were still uncomfortable with a young man doing alterations, but they couldn't deny the quality of his work. Marcus had changed too. He'd put on weight, his hands no longer shook, and there was a confidence in his movements that hadn't been there before. He'd also developed a thick skin about the comments. When people made jokes about his work, he simply smiled and showed them what he could create. More importantly, he smiled easily and often. On a Tuesday afternoon, a silver Lexus pulled up to the workshop, the kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Expensive, pristine, completely out of place. A woman in her 60s stepped out, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Eleanor made in a month. She had silver hair, sharp eyes, and the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. "Are you open?" she asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "Depends on what you need," Eleanor said carefully. She'd learned to be cautious with people like this. They usually wanted something specific, and weren't patient with delays. "I have a problem. I've taken this dress to 3 different tailors, they've all done alterations, charged me thousands, but it still doesn't fit right." The woman's frustration was evident. "I was passing through, and saw your workshop, thought I'd try one more place before I give up and buy a new dress entirely." "What kind of problem?" Eleanor asked. The bodice pulls wrong, makes the whole dress hang awkwardly. The tailors say everything is technically correct, but I know something's wrong. Eleanor walked to the car. May I see it? The woman opened the back door, revealing a garment bag. Inside was an expensive evening gown, deep burgundy silk with intricate beading. Eleanor examined it carefully, running her hands along the seams. After a moment she shook her head. This is beyond me, but I can fix it, Marcus said suddenly. Both women turned to look at him. He'd been quietly working at the cutting table. Marcus, Eleanor said carefully, this is a designer piece, computer-cut pattern, hand-sewn beading. I don't need special equipment, Marcus said, walking over. There was no arrogance in his voice, just quiet confidence. May I? The woman in the suit studied Marcus, this young man with fabric-stained hands and second-hand clothes. Her eyebrow raised slightly. A boy who sews. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said steadily, meeting her eyes. A boy who sews. Something in his tone, the quiet dignity of it, made the woman nod. Why not? Everyone else has failed. Your turn. Marcus carefully removed the dress from the bag, held it up to the light. He examined the bodice, the way it pulled, the stress points in the fabric. Eleanor had taught him this, to see not just with eyes, but with understanding. After a full minute, Marcus turned to the woman. Put it on. I need to see how it moves on you. Here, we have a fitting room in back. When the woman emerged wearing the dress, Marcus circled her slowly, studying every line, every fold. He knelt down, placed his hands on the fabric, felt how it wanted to drape. There, Marcus said quietly. The side seams were taken in, but the princess seams weren't adjusted to compensate. The dress is fighting itself. The outer layer wants to fall one way, but the inner structure is forcing it another direction. The woman raised her eyebrows. The other tailors said. The other tailors were looking for obvious problems. This is subtle, but small problems create big distortions if you ignore them. Marcus looked at Eleanor. We can fix it, but I'll need to take apart the bodice entirely and rebuild it. Do it, the woman said. For the next 3 hours, Marcus worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Eleanor supervised, but didn't interfere, recognizing that the boy had found his element. This wasn't about following instructions anymore. This was about understanding, about intuition, about that rare gift of knowing how fabric thinks. Finally Marcus straightened up. Try it now. The woman put on the dress again. Her expression transformed from skepticism to amazement. The dress no longer pulled. It draped perfectly, moved with her body, looked exactly how an expensive gown should look. The pull is gone, she said, turning in front of the mirror. How did you? The fabric told me what it needed, Marcus said simply. The woman took off the dress and turned to face Marcus directly. What's your name, young man? Marcus Williams, ma'am. How long have you been doing this? About 3 months, ma'am. 3 months. The woman looked at Eleanor. You taught him. I showed him the basics, Eleanor said. The rest, that's all him. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. My name is Catherine Bradford. I own Bradford Fashion House. 6 boutiques across 3 states, specializing in custom alterations and bespoke designs. I'm always looking for talent, real talent, not just people who can follow a pattern. She handed the card to Marcus. I want to offer you a position, a real position. I'll send you to fashion school in New York, pay for everything, tuition, housing, materials. You have a gift, young man, a rare one. She paused, then added with a slight smile, and frankly the industry needs more men who can do this work at your level. There's a huge market for male designers and tailors, especially ones who understand women's clothing this well. You'd be surprised how many clients specifically request male tailors. You shouldn't waste this talent in. She gestured vaguely at the workshop. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. Marcus stared at the card like it might burn him. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Here's what I'm offering. Full scholarship to Parsons School of Design. 2 years of intensive education with some of the best instructors in the country. After that, a position at any of our locations you choose, or we help you launch your own line. Mrs. Bradford, Eleanor said, finding her voice. That's a generous offer, but nothing. Bradford looked at Eleanor with respect but also finality. Ma'am, I can see you've done a good job with this young man. You should be proud. but he has potential that extends beyond this neighborhood. You know it, I know it, and I think he knows it too. She turned back to Marcus. Take a few days, think it over, but opportunities like this don't come around often. And don't let anyone tell you that this isn't work for a man. Some of the greatest designers in the world are men. Valentino Yves Saint Laurent, Tom Ford, Alexander McQueen. The industry is full of incredibly successful male designers. Your gender isn't a limitation, it's an advantage if you're good enough. And you young men are definitely good enough. I'll be in town until Friday. The number on that card reaches me directly. Bradford paid Eleanor triple the usual rate for the repair, got in her Lexus and drove away. The workshop felt very quiet after she left. Marcus stood holding the business card, not looking at Eleanor. You should take it, Eleanor said finally. The words like gravel in her throat. The offer, you should take it. Eleanor turned back to her workbench, started organizing thread that didn't need organizing. That's the opportunity of a lifetime. Real future, real money, everything I can't give you here. But no buts. This is what we've been working toward, isn't it? Getting you skilled enough to make something of yourself. Eleanor's voice was rough. Well, mission accomplished. You're good enough for the big leagues. Can't ask for better than that. Miss Eleanor, go upstairs. Think about it. We'll talk tomorrow. I don't have a home, Marcus said quietly. This is my home. Just go, Marcus. Please. Marcus left, and Eleanor stood alone in the workshop she'd spent her whole life building. The workshop that had never been enough. Not for her husband, not for her daughter, and now not for the boy she'd come to think of as what? A second chance. She looked at the wedding dress, hanging finished and perfect. Everyone leaves eventually, she told the empty room. Should have learned that by now. Later that evening, as Eleanor was locking up, she found herself crying. Not sad tears exactly, proud tears, bittersweet tears, because Marcus should take that opportunity. She knew it. He deserved it. He'd earned it. But it didn't make the upcoming loneliness any easier to face. 3 days later, Marcus accepted the offer. He didn't tell Eleanor right away. He couldn't find the words. But on Thursday evening, as they were closing up the workshop, Marcus finally spoke. I called Mrs. Bradford. I'm going to take the job. Eleanor's hand stilled on the spool she was putting away. Good, that's good. Is it? Marcus's voice was anguished. Because it doesn't feel good. It feels like I'm abandoning you. You're not abandoning anyone. You're moving forward. That's what you're supposed to do. Eleanor forced herself to turn and face Marcus. I'm proud of you, child. You hear me? I'm proud. Then why won't you look at me? Eleanor met his eyes then, and Marcus saw something there that made his chest tighten. Not anger, something worse, resignation. Like Eleanor had expected this all along, like she'd been preparing for it. When do you leave? Eleanor asked. Monday. Mrs. Bradford is arranging everything. She said I should pack light. They'll provide what I need. Monday. That's soon. Yeah. They stood in awkward silence, all the words they should say locked behind fear and pride. I'll finish up here, Eleanor said finally. You go get some rest. Miss Eleanor, go on now. Marcus wanted to argue, to say something that would fix this, but he didn't know what. So he left, climbing the stairs to the small apartment above the workshop where Eleanor had let him stay. He didn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, clutching his mother's photograph, wondering if she would be proud of him or disappointed. That night, as Marcus lay awake upstairs, he heard voices in the workshop below. Eleanor and Ruth were talking, their voices carrying through the old floorboards. You're letting him go? Ruth's voice was surprised. After everything, what am I supposed to do? Hold him back. This is what he needs. Eleanor, you've been taking losses for months, taking on unprofitable jobs just so he could practice. Deliberately breaking down your own equipment so he'd have something to fix, so he wouldn't feel useless. Ruth's voice was gentle now, concerned. You've been spending money on his food, his supplies, his materials. The electric bill is 2 months overdue. I saw the notice. He needed help, Ruth. I know, and you gave it, but you can't even pay your own bills anymore. You're eating 1 meal a day. Don't think I don't notice. There was a long silence. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice thick with emotion. I'm trying to be the person Mama would have wanted me to be. The person who doesn't turn away from someone in need, even if it costs me everything. I know, Ruth said softly. I know, but Eleanor, teaching a boy to sew, you gave him a gift, but you also gave him a burden. The world isn't kind to men who do this work. The world isn't kind to anyone who's different, Eleanor replied, but that doesn't mean we should stop being different. It means we should be brave enough to change the world. I hope you're right, Ruth said. I hope this ends well for him. Marcus lay frozen in the darkness, tears streaming down his face. He'd had no idea of the extent of Eleanor's sacrifice, the full weight of what this woman had given up to help a stranger who'd knocked on her door one rainy night. And in that moment, Marcus understood what he had to do, not just take the opportunity for himself, but make it count, make it worth Eleanor's sacrifice, and somehow, someday find a way to give back what she'd given him. On Monday morning, a car arrived to take him to New York. Eleanor was already in the workshop, working on a different project, pointedly not watching as Marcus loaded his single backpack into the trunk. Thank you, Marcus said from the doorway, for everything. Eleanor didn't turn around. You're welcome. Do good, child. I will. I promise. I'll make you proud. You already have. The car pulled away. Eleanor finally looked up, watched through the grimy window as the vehicle disappeared down the street. Then she went back to work. Alone again, with only the sound of her sewing machine and her own breathing to keep her company. The wedding dress hung in the corner, perfect and complete, with no one to appreciate it. Just like Eleanor herself, 5 years passed, the workshop survived. Barely. Eleanor took whatever work came her way, no longer caring about the quality of the jobs or the customers. She hemmed what needed hemming, and collected what she could. The industrial sewing machine her mother had given her sat idle most days now, too expensive to run for the small jobs that came in. The light in her eyes, briefly rekindled, had gone out again. But not entirely, because Marcus had kept his promise in his own way. Every few months a postcard would arrive, never with much detail, just brief updates. Miss Eleanor, I'm doing well. School is challenging but incredible. Thank you for teaching me to see. Miss Eleanor, I finished my first year, top of my class in pattern making. I learned the foundation from you. Miss Eleanor, I got an internship with a major design house. They say I have real talent. You gave me that. Miss Eleanor, a magazine interviewed me about being a male fashion student. I told them about you, about how you taught me that courage means doing what you love regardless of what others think. Miss Eleanor kept every postcard in a box under the counter. She told herself she was happy Marcus was succeeding, told herself that was enough, but the postcards felt distant, polite, like obligation rather than connection. And they never mentioned coming back. The last postcard had arrived about 6 months ago. Since then, nothing but silence. Ruth visited every Sunday, bringing groceries, cleaning the apartment above the workshop that Eleanor had stopped maintaining. She didn't say I told you so, but it hung in the air between them anyway. You should retire, she said one Sunday, surveying the dusty, cluttered space. Sell this place, come live with me, and do what? Eleanor asked. She looked older now, her hair fully gray, her movements slower. She was 60 years old and felt ancient. Rest, enjoy your life. You've worked hard enough. This is all I know, Ruth. No, she said gently. It's all you have left. That's different. She was right, of course. The workshop had become less a business and more a museum of memories. The wedding dress still hung in the corner, covered now with a sheet. Eleanor couldn't bear to look at it. It reminded her too much of the brief period when she'd felt alive again, when she'd had someone to teach, someone to believe in. Still, on slow days, Eleanor found herself listening for the sound of footsteps, watching the door, hoping. But hoping, she'd learned, was just another thread that eventually frayed. One evening, as she was closing up, Eleanor stood in front of the covered wedding dress. Slowly, she pulled off the sheet. The dress still looked perfect, preserved by careful storage. She touched the beadwork, remembering Marcus's hands carefully placing each one, his concentration, his growing confidence, his determination to prove that a man could do this work just as well as any woman. I tried, Eleanor whispered to the empty room. I tried. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She went down to the workshop at 2 in the morning, turned on a single work light, and sat on her stool, surrounded by the tools of her trade. The radio still worked. She turned it on, and like a gift from the universe, or a curse, It was playing an old jazz song, the same one that had been playing the night Marcus had first arrived, soaking wet and desperate. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Eleanor looked around the workshop. Every tool, every corner, every stain on the concrete held a memory. Her mother teaching her how to thread a needle, Grace at 3 years old toddling around, playing with scraps of fabric, Marcus, careful and eager, learning to see what fabric wanted to become, learning to be brave enough to defy the world's expectations. "I'm tired," she said aloud to the empty room. "I'm so damn tired." She thought about Ruth's offer. Retirement, peace, an easy chair and television, and waiting to die. It sounded awful, but it also sounded like relief. Maybe it was time to admit defeat, time to accept that some things can't be mended, and some people are meant to be alone. She stood up, walked to the wedding dress, placed her hand on the silk. The fabric was cool under her palm. "Sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I tried." A sound outside made her look up. Footsteps on the gravel, probably someone looking for directions, or worse, someone looking to rob the place. Eleanor didn't even have the energy to care, but then she saw the shadow in the doorway, and her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. A figure stepped into the dim light, tall now, filled out, wearing nice clothes, but with the same gentle eyes. "Hi, Miss Eleanor," Marcus said quietly. Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. "I know," Marcus continued, taking a tentative step inside. "I know it's been 5 years. I know the postcards weren't enough. I know I should have called, should have explained more." Other's voice came out smaller than she intended, more hurt than angry. I can't do this again." Marcus flinched as if struck. "I deserve that, but please let me." "Why are you here, Marcus?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "You got everything you wanted. You don't owe me anything. The postcards were nice, but you don't need to. It's not like that." "No." Eleanor's pain began to surface. "Then what is it like? You left. You sent a few postcards like I was some distant relative you felt obligated to remember at Christmas. I was good enough when you needed something, but once you got your big break, I was just, what? Someone to send polite updates to." "Miss Eleanor, please, what do you want from me?" "Absolution. You want me to tell you it's okay that you barely kept in touch, that I didn't spend 5 years wondering if you were really happy, really safe, if anyone was giving you trouble for being a man in fashion." Eleanor's voice cracked. "You got everything you deserved. I'm proud of that." "I am, but why come back now?" "Why? Because I came back to fix something." Marcus interrupted, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "Nothing here needs fixing. Everything's already broken, including me." "I know you think that," Marcus said softly, "but you're wrong." The door opened wider, and Ruth stepped in. She'd been standing outside, listening. Her face was red, her expression conflicted between protective anger and something else. "Marcus," Ruth said, her voice controlled but tight, "you have some nerve, showing up here after all this time. My sister trusted you, cared about you more than you'll ever know. And those postcards," she shook her head, "those weren't enough, not nearly enough." "I know," Marcus said, "I know I hurt her, I hurt you both, but I had a reason, a good reason. If you'll just let me explain." "No explanation is good enough," Ruth started, but Eleanor held up a hand, stopping her. Because despite everything, the hurt, the years of wondering, the distance, she could see something in Marcus's eyes. Determination, purpose, and something else. Something that looked like love. "Talk," Eleanor said quietly. "You've got 5 minutes." Marcus took a deep breath, and pulled out a chair, sitting down slowly. "The day Mrs. Bradford offered me the job," Marcus began, "I was excited. Of course I was. It was everything I'd never dared to dream about. But I was also terrified. Terrified of leaving you. You were the first person who'd shown me kindness in, maybe ever, so you expressed your gratitude by barely staying in touch," Ruth said, her voice softer but still hurt. "Let him finish," Eleanor said quietly. Marcus nodded, his hands twisting together. "That night before I left I couldn't sleep. I came down here to the workshop around midnight. I was going to tell you I wasn't going to take the job. That I wanted to stay here with you, building something together." He paused, "but before I could come in, I heard voices. You and Ruth were in here talking. Eleanor's expression shifted. Understanding began to dawn. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, Marcus continued, his voice thick with emotion. But I heard everything. Ruth, you told Eleanor that she was destroying herself by helping me, that she'd been taking losses to give me work, to teach me, that she'd been deliberately taking on unprofitable jobs so I could practice, so I wouldn't feel useless. Ruth looked away, her jaw tight. You told her that she couldn't even pay her electric bill because she was spending money on me, on food, on supplies, on materials. Marcus's voice broke. And Miss Eleanor, you said you were trying to be the person your mother would have wanted you to be, the person who didn't turn away from someone in need even if it cost you everything. You shouldn't have heard that, Eleanor said quietly. But I did, and it changed everything. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locked on Eleanor's. You were sacrificing yourself for me, your business, your financial security, maybe even your health. Ruth was right. I was destroying you just by being here. And I couldn't do that to you. So you left, Eleanor said. So I left, not because I didn't care, because I cared too much. Marcus's tears began to fall freely now. I thought if I took Bradford's offer, worked hard, became successful, I could come back one day and fix things, actually fix them. Not just broken dresses, but your business, your life, everything you'd given up for me. It's been 5 years, Ruth said, her voice gentler now. And those postcards, they were so brief, so distant, because every word I wanted to write felt inadequate. Marcus said, I wanted to tell you about my plans, about what I was building, but I was afraid. Afraid that if I shared it before it was real, before I actually had something to give back, it would just be empty promises. Another disappointment. He wiped his eyes. The postcards were all I could manage. Enough to let you know I was okay, that I hadn't forgotten, that what you taught me mattered, but not so much that I'd reveal what I was planning before it was ready. I know that wasn't enough. I know I should have called, should have explained, but I was so focused on building something worthy of what you'd given me. And the last 6 months, Eleanor asked, why did the postcards stop? Marcus took a shaky breath. Because I was finalizing everything. The building purchase, the business plan, the funding. I was terrified that if I wrote to you during that time, I'd accidentally give something away, that I'd ruin the surprise, or worse, that something would fall through, and I'd have gotten your hopes up for nothing. He reached into his jacket, and pulled out a rolled-up set of papers. So I worked in silence. I saved, I learned everything I could, and I built this. He unrolled the papers on the workbench. They were architectural plans, detailed, professional, beautiful. This is Eleanor's legacy atelier, Marcus said, his voice stronger now. A full-service custom fashion house and design school. 5 workrooms, modern equipment, classroom space, everything needed to teach young people, especially young men like I was, how to create beauty and believe in themselves, regardless of what the world says they should be. Eleanor stared at the plans, unable to speak. The building 2 blocks from here. The old garment factory that's been empty for years. I bought it, or rather my company bought it. Mrs. Bradford helped me start a design house in New York. We're partners, but I own 40%. And it's successful, very successful. And every dollar I made beyond what I needed to live, I put aside for this. Marcus pointed to different areas of the plans. This is your private studio separate from the teaching space so you can still work on what you love without interruption. This is the classroom where you'll teach, multiple stations, each set up like a real workshop. This is the showroom for finished pieces, where the community can see what's being created here. And this, he pointed to a corner of the plan, is where the wedding dress will be displayed. The first thing people see when they walk in. A reminder that broken things can be made beautiful, and that it takes courage to create beauty in your own way. Ruth's hand was covering her mouth. Tears ran down her face. The funding is secure, Marcus continued. Construction can start next month. It'll take 6 months to complete, and when it opens it'll be yours to run. I'll be a silent partner, handling business matters from New York, but this is your atelier, your legacy. He looked directly at Eleanor. But more than that, it's a place where young people, especially young men who love this work, can learn that they don't have to choose between their passion and the world's approval. that they can be brave enough to do what they love, that there are people like you who'll support them. That masculinity isn't about conforming to someone else's narrow definition. It's about having the courage to be yourself. Eleanor still couldn't speak. She looked at the plans, at the careful details, at the love evident in every line. I know I hurt you by leaving, Marcus said, his voice breaking completely. I know I hurt you by keeping my distance, by those inadequate postcards that couldn't begin to express what you meant to me. But I couldn't come back until I had something real to give you. Something that matched even a fraction of what you gave me. He stood up, walked to Eleanor, and knelt down in front of her, the way someone might kneel before a mother. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a future when I couldn't see past the next day. You gave me the courage to be myself when the world said I should be someone else. You gave me, his voice failed him. He tried again. You gave me back my life. You gave me back myself. You showed me that being a man who creates beauty isn't weakness. It's strength. Eleanor looked down at this young man, no longer the scared boy who'd knocked on her door 5 years ago, but a man who'd made something of himself and come back to share it. Slowly, her hands shaking, Eleanor reached out and placed them on Marcus's shoulders. You beautiful, stubborn child, she whispered. You brilliant, foolish, beautiful child. And then she pulled Marcus into a hug, holding on like she was afraid to let go, tears streaming down her face. Ruth watched them, her own face wet with tears, and for the first time in 5 years she smiled at the sight of her sister's joy. When they finally separated, Ruth walked over and sat down across from them. Her face was serious, her eyes still red from crying. Marcus, she said, I owe you an apology. You don't. Yes, I do. Let me say this. She took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I stood in this workshop and called you trouble. I told my sister she was destroying herself by helping you. I said terrible things, cruel things, because I was scared. Scared of seeing Eleanor hurt again. Scared of watching her give away pieces of herself to someone who might not appreciate it. She looked at her hands, worn and lined from years of practical work, and I said you were wasting your time learning a skill that would only make you a joke. That no man should be doing this work. I was wrong about that too. So wrong. You were trying to protect her, Marcus said. I understand that. Understanding doesn't make it right. Ruth met his eyes. You were a boy who'd been dealt a terrible hand. You were trying your best with nothing, and no one to help you. And when my sister, bless her stubborn heart, finally did help you, I tried to tear it down. I tried to make you ashamed of what you loved. She reached across and took Marcus's hand. I'm sorry for that. For making you think there was something wrong with being a man who creates beauty. For not seeing that the world needs more men like you. Men who are brave enough to defy expectations. Men who understand that strength comes in many forms. Ruth. Eleanor started. Hush. I'm not done. She turned back to Marcus. When I heard you at the door tonight, I was ready to tear into you. Ready to protect Eleanor one more time from being hurt. But then I saw these plans, and I realized something. You left to protect her too. We were both trying to save her in our own ways. The difference is you succeeded. You built something real, something lasting, something that'll help other young men like you find their way. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for caring about my sister enough to sacrifice your own happiness. For working 5 years, largely alone, to build something that would give back what she gave you. For coming back when it would have been easier to just send money and stay away. For being brave enough to do the work you love even when people like me said you shouldn't. I could never stay away, Marcus said simply. This is home. She's family. She is, Ruth said. And so are you, whether you know it or not. She stood up, walked to Eleanor and put her hand on her shoulder. You were right all along, little sister. I thought you were being foolish, wasting your kindness on someone who didn't deserve it. Teaching a boy skills that would only bring him mockery. But Marcus deserved every bit of kindness you gave him, and more. And he proved that men can do this work beautifully, that the only limitations are the ones we put on ourselves. I should have seen that. I should have trusted your judgment. Eleanor covered her hand with hers. You were trying to take care of me. You always do. I know that. Well, maybe I should try being more like you. More willing to see the good in people instead of just the risk. More willing to question my assumptions about what men and women should do. She smiled through her tears. Though I'm still going to worry about you. That's what big sisters do. I wouldn't have it any other way. Ruth looked at the plan spread out on the workbench. Eleanor's legacy atelier. It's perfect. When you open this place, this whole neighborhood is going to change. Young people who need a chance will finally get one. Young men who love this work will have a place where they're celebrated, not mocked. And maybe," she paused, emotional, "maybe some other scared kid will find their way here, just like Marcus did, and you'll be able to help them too." "That's the idea," Marcus said, "to build something that lasts, something that keeps giving chances to people who need them, and something that proves that creating beauty isn't women's work or men's work, it's human work. It's work that matters." Ruth nodded. "I want to help, with the business side, permits, accounting, whatever you need. Consider me officially invested in Eleanor's legacy." "You don't have to," Eleanor started. "I want to. Let me do this. Let me be part of something good." She looked between the two of them. "Let me be part of this family you two have built." The three of them stood in the old workshop, the place where it all began, and for the first time in years the space felt full, not of fabric or thread, or work, but of something more important: love, forgiveness, hope, progress. The wedding dress hung nearby, still perfect under its protective sheet, a testament to what patience and care could accomplish. Tomorrow they would start building the new atelier. Tonight they were just three people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen not to let go. 6 months passed in a blur of construction, planning and anticipation. The old garment factory transformed. Where there had been broken windows and rotting beams, now there were clean glass panes and solid steel. The 5 workrooms gleamed with new equipment. The classroom had whiteboards, comfortable seating, and a library of fashion texts and pattern books. The showroom looked more like an art gallery than a workshop. Warm, welcoming, inspiring. Eleanor worked alongside the construction crew most days, unable to believe what was taking shape. Marcus split his time between New York and home, and it was home now, undeniably, managing both businesses, making sure every detail of the new atelier was perfect. Ruth handled the administrative work with fierce efficiency. She secured grants for training programs, established partnerships with local high schools and community organizations, and spread the word. By the time construction finished, they had a waiting list of young people who wanted to learn. The grand opening was set for a Saturday in October, when the weather was perfect and the whole neighborhood could come. That morning, Eleanor stood in the main workroom, looking around in wonder. The walls were painted soft cream, the floors were polished concrete, cutting tables lined one wall, each with its own set of professional tools. In the corner, visible through glass walls that separated the display area from the workspace, hung the wedding dress, preserved and perfect, a plaque beneath it reading, "Broken things can be made beautiful again. Courage means being yourself." "You ready for this?" Marcus asked, walking up beside her. "I don't know. It still doesn't feel real." "It's real, and it's yours." "Ours," Eleanor corrected. "I never could have done this without you. You did it first," Marcus said quietly. 5 years ago, when you let a stranger into your workshop, when you fed him and taught him, and believed in him. When you told him that being different was a strength, not a weakness. This," he gestured around. "This is just bigger, but the heart of it, that was always yours." People started arriving. Martha from the corner store, carrying a homemade banner that read, "Congratulations Eleanor and Marcus." Carlos, the delivery driver, who'd been one of Eleanor's few loyal customers, brought his whole family. Mrs. Thompson from the general store came with her grandchildren. Former customers, curious neighbors, and even some of the people who'd once spread rumors about Marcus. They all came, drawn by the transformation they'd witnessed. Ruth stood at the entrance, greeting everyone, her face bright with pride. She'd printed programs that explained the atelier's mission to provide fashion training and career opportunities to young people in need, regardless of their circumstances, their past or their gender. The mayor showed up, impressed by the partnership between Eleanor's local expertise and Marcus's business success. Several local reporters came to cover the story of the young man who'd overcome both poverty and prejudice to build something beautiful. But there was also resistance, whispered in corners. "A sewing school," one man muttered to his companion. "What kind of future is that? These kids should be learning real skills, and they're encouraging boys to sew." Another scoffed. "What's next? Teaching girls to do construction?" "Actually yes," Ruth said pleasantly, having overheard. She'd positioned herself nearby specifically to address these comments. "We're partnering with the vocational school to create exchange programs. Our students can learn construction trades, and their students can learn design and tailoring. Skills are skills. Talent is talent. The only thing that matters is the work you can do, not what's between your legs. The men looked uncomfortable and moved away, but the most important arrivals were the 15 young people who'd been accepted into the first training program. They ranged from 16 to 22. Some had dropped out of school, some had been in trouble, some were simply poor, with no clear path forward, and 5 of them were young men. They all looked nervous, hopeful, and trying not to show either. They reminded Eleanor of Marcus on that rainy night 5 years ago. They reminded Marcus of himself. "Welcome," Eleanor said to them, her voice carrying across the workroom. "Welcome to Eleanor's legacy. You're here because someone saw potential in you. Maybe you don't see it in yourself yet, but we do. This place exists to teach you a trade, yes, but more than that, it exists to teach you something I learned from a very wise young man." She looked at Marcus, who stood beside her. "That broken things fabric, lives, hearts can all be mended. If someone cares enough to try, and that being yourself, following your passion, doing what you love regardless of what others think you should do, that's not weakness. That's the bravest thing in the world." She paused, emotion thick in her throat. "I care enough. We all care enough. So let's get to work." The crowd dispersed after the ceremony, leaving the 15 new students standing in the main workroom, looking uncertain. They were rough around the edges. Baggy clothes, suspicious eyes, the defensive posture of people who'd learned to expect disappointment. The 5 young men looked especially uncomfortable, glancing at each other as if wondering if they'd made a mistake. Marcus stepped forward, holding a needle and thread, the same tools Eleanor had first placed in his hands 5 years ago. "My name is Marcus Williams," he said. "5 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. Actually, I was worse off. I was homeless, hungry, and everyone in this town had decided I was worthless. I believed them. I thought I was cursed, that everything I touched would break, that I was meant to fail." He walked among them, making eye contact with each student, especially the young men. "Then I met Miss Eleanor. She didn't see a curse or a failure. She saw someone who needed a chance, just one chance, and she gave it to me, even though it cost her customers, money and respect in this community." One of the young men, tall with nervous hands, spoke up. "But, you're a guy, doing this. Don't people make fun of me?" Marcus finished. "Question my masculinity, suggest I should be doing real work. Yes, all the time, especially at first." He smiled. "But you want to know what I learned? The men who mocked me are still doing the same jobs they were doing 5 years ago, still stuck in their small worlds with their small minds. Meanwhile, I've designed for celebrities, I've had my work in magazines, I've built a successful business, I've created things that matter." Marcus looked directly at the young men in the group. "The world is changing, slowly, but it's changing. Some of the most successful designers and tailors in the world are men. Valentino, Tom Ford, Alexander McQueen, Dior, Armani. You think anyone questions their masculinity? No, because they're so good at what they do, that gender becomes irrelevant. The work speaks for itself." He held up the needle. "This is a simple tool, probably costs $1, but in the right hands with the right knowledge, this tool can create beauty that changes lives. That's not women's work, that's not men's work, that's important work, and if you're brave enough to do it, gender doesn't matter. Talent does, vision does, courage does." He walked to a dress form they'd positioned in the center of the room, draped with a partially completed dress that had obvious problems. "Today I'm going to teach you what Miss Eleanor taught me. We're going to look at this dress and figure out what's wrong. Not with fancy equipment or computer programs, with our eyes, our hands, and our hearts." The students moved closer, intrigued despite themselves. The young men still looked uncertain, but they were listening. Marcus gestured to the dress. The bodice puckered awkwardly, the hemline was uneven, the sleeves hung wrong. "What do you see?" he asked. "Looks like a mess," one student said. "Good, what else?" "It's not balanced," another offered, "like it's fighting itself." "Excellent. Now look closer." Marcus moved among them. "Don't just see the problems, feel what the fabric is trying to tell you. This dress wants to be beautiful. It's just been hurt. Can you see where?" They stood in silence, 15 young people studying a broken dress, learning to see beyond the surface damage. One of the young men, thin with careful eyes, spoke up suddenly. The seams are wrong, they're pulling in different directions. The fabric wants to fall naturally, but the stitching is forcing it to do something else. Marcus smiled. What's your name? Daniel. Daniel just diagnosed the main problem. The person who started this dress was working against the fabric instead of with it. They were forcing their vision instead of listening to what the material wanted to become. He looked at each student. That's what happens when we're broken too. We fight against our nature. We force ourselves to be something we're not because that's what the world says we should be. We think we're beyond fixing. He placed his hand on the dress form. But we're not. With the right help, the right tools, the right patience, we can work with who we are. We can become what we're meant to be. We can be whole. We can be ourselves. Eleanor stepped forward then. That's what we're going to teach you here. Yes, you'll learn how to sew, how to design, how to create. That's important, but more than that, you'll learn how to believe you're worth the effort, how to listen to your own heart, and know when something needs mending, how to be brave enough to be yourself, even when the world tells you to be someone else. She picked up scissors and handed them to Daniel. Let's get started. For the rest of the afternoon, those 15 students worked on that dress under Marcus and Eleanor's guidance. They made mistakes, they got frustrated, but they also learned, and more importantly, they began to hope. The young men began to relax, seeing that they weren't alone, that there was a path forward for them in this work. Evening came, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The students had left, promising to return Monday. The atelier was quiet now, just Eleanor and Marcus remaining. They walked together to the display area, where the wedding dress hung, gleaming under soft lights. Eleanor ran her hand along the delicate beadwork, the way she'd done thousands of times over the years. Your mother would be proud, Marcus said, of this dress, of this place, of you. Maybe, Eleanor said. She always said, the work we do matters, not because of what we create, but because of who we become while we're creating it. Eleanor smiled. I didn't understand that when I was young. I thought she was being philosophical, but she was right. Every broken thing you mend teaches you something about yourself. What did mending me teach you? Marcus asked. Eleanor turned to look at him. This young man who'd arrived broken and desperate, and had somehow healed both of them in the process. That I was wrong, Eleanor said. I spent 5 years after my daughter died, believing I was meant to be alone, that I'd failed at being a mother, failed at being a wife, failed at everything that mattered. I thought maybe I deserved loneliness. Her voice grew thick. But then you knocked on my door, and you were so scared, so lost, so much like I'd been at your age. And I had a choice. I could turn away and prove to myself that I really was the failure I believed I was, or I could try one more time, one more chance to be the woman my parents raised me to be. You saved my life, Marcus said quietly. No, Eleanor shook her head. You saved mine. You reminded me why I do this work, why I get up every morning, why any of it matters. She gestured to the atelier around them. This place exists because you believed I was worth coming back for, because you saw value in an older woman who'd given up on herself, because you were brave enough to be yourself, even when the world said young men shouldn't do this work. I saw a mother, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I saw the mother I never really had, the one who teaches you, believes in you, doesn't give up on you, even when you mess everything up, the one who tells you it's okay to be yourself. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and I saw my child. A second chance to get it right, to be present, to teach what matters, to encourage courage instead of conformity. They stood in silence for a moment, both overcome with emotion. Can I? Marcus hesitated. Can I call you that? What I've wanted to call you for 5 years, but didn't think I had the right. Eleanor knew what he was asking. She nodded, unable to speak. Thank you, Mama, Marcus whispered, for everything, for teaching me that being myself was enough, that being a man who creates beauty wasn't wrong, that courage means being who you are, not who others think you should be. Eleanor pulled him into a tight hug, and they stood there in the fading light, surrounded by fabric and dreams made real. A mother and son who'd found each other in the least likely place, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces, who'd proven that love and courage could overcome prejudice and limitation. When they finally separated, Eleanor wiped her eyes and smiled. "Come on, son. Let's take one last look around before we lock up. See what we've built." They walked through the atelier together, Eleanor guiding Marcus through each room, pointing out details, sharing plans for the future. The evening light turned everything golden, filling the space with warmth. As they stood in the main workroom one last time, surrounded by the tools that would shape so many lives, Marcus spoke quietly. "Do you hear that?" Eleanor listened. Through the
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.